Welcome to Talk Law Radio. I'm Todd Marquardt. On the radio, on Podcasts Live, on Facebook Live, on YouTube, on talklawradio.com. Also 9:30 a.m. The Answer and 6:30 a.m. The Word here in San Antonio at 11 o'clock in the morning on Saturdays and 4:30 in the afternoon on Sundays on 9:30 a.m. Also in Houston on KNTH 1070 AM and 103.3 FM. Today we're going to be talking about Pilates, homeschool, coaching kids, and legacy with Christian Mueller, owner of Club Pilates here in San Antonio. But first, let's check in for the financial focus with Steve Warren with Financial Planning HQ. He and his sons are true financial planners. They don't sell investments or insurance. They provide a planning service that helps financially successful people reach their financial goals with less time and stress, so they can do what they really want to do without having to deal with money managers and CPAs who refuse to communicate with one another. So in addition to legal blind spots, I'd like to highlight a financial blind spot. So Steve, welcome back to the show.
Super fantastic. I'm glad to be back.
Last week we ended with a question our audience could ask their financial advisor.
Sure.
Which areas of my financial plan are currently on track? What does on track mean?
Well, first of all, I would say that I would bet that a lot of your audience probably doesn't have a financial plan because the surveys kind of show that most people don't have a comprehensive written lifetime financial strategy. But what does on track mean? Well, for our clients, it means that your financial behavior and the progress that you made align with your specific milestones, the goals that you have that require money and planning to achieve, and by when you want to achieve those goals. And those are all things that you've expressed to us, so they're on a written document. And a typical ideal client has 25 objectives. 25 objectives in the 5 disciplines. That would be the tax, the legal, every type of insurance that exists, wealth planning, and financial planning. So when we send out a questionnaire, clients tell us what their objectives are. Like for taxes, it could be we want to pay less in taxes. And so if a client is off track, then we'll take steps to make sure they get on track. So we'll prescribe specific strategies that they need to undertake, even if they get off course just by 1 degree. And then what we do is we monitor the progress that they're making to get back on track. So we hold them accountable to do what they need to do, just like a fitness coach might hold their student accountable to get that extra 10 reps in or whatever,
Right.
whatever it might be. So an example of that might be like, I'm thinking of a client that's going to retire in June of this year. And so her goal was, she actually used the words financial independence, not retirement. And her goal was to retire at the end of June with 172,000 in net spendable income. And so she's currently on track to do that. Everything looks good. She's just going to stay on till she gets her final bonus, and then she's going to leave. So that's an easy example because she is on track. But that's something that I think a lot of people in your audience maybe are not held to account for. To do the things that they need to do, because sometimes, Todd, advisors tend to be politically correct
Right.
instead of the unvarnished truth, or say this is what you need to do in order to accomplish that goal.
Yeah. So if we ask our audience to rate their financial advisor on a scale from 1 to 10, and 1 being an absolute disaster and 10 being a role model for the planet, how would you rate your financial advisor? And what if they only rated them a 6 or a 7?
Most people do rate their financial house a 6 or a 7. So if I ask a question like, how would you rate your financial house, with 1 being a disaster and 10 being a role model role model for the planet, most people say a 6 or a 7. So I would say that if your audience, if everyone out there feels that they are a 7 or even an 8 and they'd like to be a 10, at the very least, give us a call. You can give me a call, Steve Warren, at 210-685-2722, and we can schedule an initial meeting, which we call a financial roadmap meeting.
So you think that you can get them to rate you out of 10? Do your clients rate you out of 10?
You know, when I ask that question, because I do like to get feedback from our clients, they always get to like a 9 because they don't want me to think that there isn't room for improvement.
Okay,
So,
that's fair.
yeah, I guess they don't want us to slouch.
So what outcomes can a client expect from working with your team?
Well, they can expect to the the biggest outcome is that they can expect to, get their entire financial house in perfect order. I mean, that's the outcome. It takes time to get there. It typically takes about 12 to 15 months, with us doing a lot of heavy lifting in the first year. And then once we get there, then we've got to keep them there because, things change. Everything changes. Clients love predictability. So they don't like to have tax surprises. They don't want to miss financial deadlines. They don't want to, miss financial opportunities and, just miss opportunities that they could really benefit from.
Mm-hmm.
And so clients like to have predictability. And so we've got a good rhythm of communication where all of the client's subject matter experts they're all coordinated. So their CPA, their attorney, their financial planner, wealth management, all that is coordinated. Everything's on the same page because, as I mentioned earlier, the objectives and what we call a live action plan, by the way, the things that they need to do in order to achieve their goals, all of their subject matter experts have that information. So they know, and everybody is on the same page. Whereas most people tend to work with their advisors in a vacuum, right? So
Mm-hmm.
they'll work with you, they'll work with their CPA, and nobody has stepped up to coordinate all of those subject matter experts.
Right.
So the main outcome is predictability, no surprises, and just the peace of mind of just knowing that you're on track.
You ever meet with anybody that had unrealistic expectations? I want to retire in 10 years, but they don't have enough money to do that.
Yeah, I've run into that before, and run into, performance issues, expectations that we perform at a certain level for just one discipline, just wealth management. So the answer to that is yes, but that doesn't happen too often.
Mm-hmm.
And the analogy that I had thought about, your audience probably remembers, if they're old enough, the story of the three little pigs, where the first two little pigs, they built their houses made of straw and something sticks and
Sticks.
straws, right?
Right.
And the other third little pig built his house made out of bricks, which took significantly more work, more effort in order to get that done. So when the big bad wolf came by and blew the houses of sticks and straws down, the other third little pig was solid.
Mm-hmm.
So his house was absolutely solid and nothing could bring it down, maybe not even a hurricane. So, the point is that the outcome that you can expect from working with us is to get your entire financial house in perfect order. And
What should our audience know about the first meeting with you?
the first meeting with us typically takes about an hour and 10 minutes. And in that meeting, I facilitate an experience where we determine, let's just say it's husband and wife. So we determine the things that are important to each of them. In essence, they're creating a shared vision. The why part is what we're addressing. Goals that require money and planning to achieve, and then a perspective of where they're at currently. So that all gets put on a document. So this is an example of a financial roadmap. And to some degree, it serves as a foundation for building a plan. And a lot that's on here is, well, the things that are important to everybody are like values. Those are unique. So Christian would have unique values. You have unique values. They're as unique as fingerprints. And so that all gets put on the financial roadmap. And if we're a good fit to work together, I'll make an offer. And if we're not, then you'll leave with value because now you've got everything in perspective and you can use it with your other financial advisors.
Great.
So the time hasn't been wasted, even if we don't, if we decide not to work together.
Yeah. They've learned something. They have something they can use.
Yeah.
Do you charge for that first meeting?
The initial consultation is complimentary to your audience. And then if we decide to work together, then we charge a flat fee. And we don't sell products. We don't sell financial products. For our planning clients, we don't charge them a percentage of assets under management, which I think almost all of our industries sort of like that.
Yeah,
Right?
and you've talked about that before. And if you're interested in learning about what Steve thinks about charging people for assets under management, search our YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube and click the magnifying glass, search for Talk Law Radio, Assets Under Management. Thank you for joining us today.
Sure. And if anybody in your audience would like to contact me, I'm Steve Warren, and my number is 210-685-2722. That's 210-685-2722.
All right, let's take a break. Welcome back to Talk Law Radio. I'm Todd Marquardt here with Christian Mueller, who's going to be telling us about his life and how he became owner of Club Pilates at Dominion. And before that, he was coaching women's basketball for 9 years, and after that, coached men's basketball for 9 years. Then you started a business.
Yep.
Tell us how you got from A to B. How did you go from coaching and teaching to entrepreneurship?
It's a great question. When I was coaching, when I finished up there, I was coaching high school. And so you always have your feeder system that's going to lead into your high school, your sixth grade, seventh grade, eighth grade. And I was pretty active in our feeder system. I wanted to, try to get those coaches to learn some of the fundamentals and things that were going to be successful for the high school program. And I was very fortunate that they were willing to do that because they were part of the private school system that we were in. They really had a lot of belief in me after seeing the success that my high school teams had. And so they wanted their sons who were on the team to, get experience in the things that were going to help them when they moved up to the high school level. So whatever I asked them to do, they did. And I would go down and watch them. They'd practice 3 days a week at 2:30 in the afternoon. And so my schedule permitted me to go and watch them practice. And one day I asked them, I said, what is it that both of you guys do that you can coach your kids at 2:30 in the afternoon? And they were both business owners.
Okay,
And
that
so,
makes sense.
yeah, my cousin actually owns 2 Club Pilates out in California, and he had talked to me about it before then, but I always sort of put it on the back burner. I loved coaching. I still love coaching. It's the best thing ever. And I was in no hurry to get out of it. But at that time, I think I had a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. And so I was starting to think ahead about, wanting to coach my own kids down the road. And so it made sense for me to look in the direction of being a business owner.
Okay, well, that's a great way to think of it. My favorite photo that I've seen of you online is your LinkedIn profile.
Mm.
You have a banner of you with your arms way up and cheering. You
Yeah.
just won some big game. Tell us about that game.
Yeah, so that was actually in the playoffs. So when I took over that program at Round Rock Christian Academy the year before, they had won a single basketball games, no games in their district. And 5 months after I took over the program, we were really fortunate, but we were district champs and we made it to the final 8 of the state tournament. So that picture that you saw was actually in the second round of playoffs. And we were down 16 points with 5 minutes and 50 seconds to go and came back and won.
Awesome.
And so where you see my hands go up was actually when we got fouled with about a second left on the clock. And I knew at that point we were going to win. So
Awesome.
yeah.
That's cool. That's a
Wow.
great story. Okay. Well, we know that you were a coach and a teacher. Um, Tell us about how you became what you needed to be to get through all of that and to really start a business. Where did you come from?
Um, So I think for me, I never had a dad growing up in New York. My grandparents were Lutheran missionaries, and when my mom and my dad divorced, my mom was going to have to assume the role of, primary breadwinner. And so my grandparents at that point, they were in their 70s. They were ready to retire. They were pastors out in St. Louis at the time. And so they agreed to move in with us in New York. And when I was 15, my mom passed away of a heart attack. So at that point, all of a sudden, I don't have any parents. And, that was obviously, that's hard for any kid to go through. I was angry at God, angry at the world. It's just, so easy to look around from a comparison standpoint and be like, well, half the kids have at least one parent. Nobody has none. You don't have anybody in your peer group that's in that same situation. So I really had a poverty mindset and a victim mindset. It was like the world is against me, type thing. And, I ended up living in 2 different youth homes after that. Like I said, I was pretty angry. I could have gone to live with my aunt and uncle in Indiana, but I was just having a real hard time emotionally and kind of, processing everything that's happened in
Yeah.
such a short amount of time, And so I ended up going to 2 different youth homes. Both of them were Christian based. They ended up, while they were very challenging, it ended up being a blessing. And when I was at the second youth home, we went to public school there and I played basketball. And I was a sophomore at the time. I actually got, through foolishness, I got expelled at one point. I got suspended at another point. And my coach, who was only 27 at the time, asked his dad, his former high school coach, and said, "Should I kick this kid off the basketball team?" Because at some point you got to think about what type of culture are you setting.
Right.
If I don't kick this kid off, what does it set for the rest of the team, et cetera? And his dad said, "You probably should, but I'll tell you this right now: basketball is the only thing that's going to reach that kid." And he was right. And so, I mean, I get emotional even just saying that, because the truth is he saved my life. At that point, that was about the only thing that I felt that I had going for me at that time. So his impact in my life, I finished up high school living on my own for 2 years in Arkansas because I wanted to stay. I could have gone back and live with my relatives, but I really did. I loved my coach. I loved my teammates. And so I wanted to continue that basketball experience. It was a good environment for me. And but since I was living on my own, I needed somebody to check on me, and he did that. So he was really there, even at 27 years old. He really kind of had a fatherly role towards me, and that made me want to get into coaching.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Sure, that was hard for you as a child. I mean, it's hard for children that have two parents to make good decisions, but I'm glad that that all turned out for you. And so you became a teacher. What was your background? What was your degree in?
So I went to Valparaiso University, and I majored in history with a minor in secondary education. And in my head, I had just always thought, I'm just going to become a high school basketball coach. Well, this is Indiana, okay? Basketball is king up there the way football is down here.
Right.
So I think I applied for 15 jobs, like right off the bat, just high school jobs that were posted as open. You don't just fill, that one role. And so the only letter that I got back was from Michigan City School System in Indiana. And they said, "We have an 8th grade girls job." And I can tell you right now that that was not on my radar to coach girls at that time at all. And if it hadn't been that one particular team, I think that it would have stopped right there. But it was an incredible group that we had. I mean, there were a number of girls that had the ability to go and play in college. We went 11-1 on the year, and the only team we lost to had a girl who ended up playing in the Final Four for Xavier years later. So
Well,
it
if
was a
I had
great
to guess,
experience.
this was all God's plan for you. I mean, He was leading you, showing you those opportunities that were a good fit for you.
Yeah. Yeah. I like the way you phrase that. I would agree. He took the circumstances of my life and was able to bring about a blessing in them, and kind of cultivate, a heart for other people, and sort of helping them develop in the same way that my coach did for me.
Yeah. Well, when I was preparing for our conversation today, knowing that Pilates is your main thing right now, I I was searching for how does Pilates interact with the law? You know what I happened to find? Well, there's a certain guy named
Oh,
Pilates
Joseph Pilates.
that came up with the workout methods. Can you kind of describe that? And then
Sure.
I'll tell you how it ties in with the law.
Okay, sure. So from my understanding, when I started, researching it back in the day, Joseph Pilates was basically acting as a nurse during World War One, and obviously the human tragedy during that time, and all of the different illnesses and things that were happening to all the soldiers back then, because it was so much more hand-to-hand combat than it is today, with just missiles and drones and things. But he had to witness so many of these people in the hospital, and he saw how long they were sitting in the beds, and he understood that their muscles were going to atrophy, and they weren't getting to move at all. So he started pulling out some of the springs that were in the mattresses,
Oh,
anything to get the body moving. And I think it all spiraled from there and became what he called contrology, and this whole Pilates system. So all spring based and that sort of thing.
okay. So it was sort of a proprietary thing that he developed.
Mhm.
And over time, other people started adopting those methods of working out. And occasionally somebody would put Mr. Pilates' photograph on their website and sort of claim that as their trademark. And so there's trademark infringement
Okay.
law,
Yeah.
copyright infringement law. There's some big cases there. But you don't have to worry about that. Are you part of some type of franchise?
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Not having much business experience myself, like I said, I did 18 years in coaching. Didn't know at all how that would translate, but I certainly had a lot of trepidation about jumping off into some other foray without any experience. Um, and so I knew if I was going to do this initially, I wanted to be with a franchise. I was a basketball coach. We have a playbook. You give it to everybody so they have it in front of you and they can work on things, learn them over time. I was looking for the same thing. I was looking for a franchise to basically give me the playbook. I believe in it, and then I'm going to run with it.
Awesome. Well, we got to take a break, but when we come back, we'll be talking about sinners and saints and legacy too. Stay tuned. In the beginning, God had one law: don't eat from the fruit of that tree. Then he gave Moses the Ten Commandments. And now we have municipal, state, and federal lawmakers that won't stop creating new laws, laws that might impact you without you knowing it. So listen to Talk Law Radio every Saturday. Listen on YouTube or Facebook, or listen on podcasts while you're walking the dog, working in the garage, or whatever else you do. But this is the third segment. It's the sinners and the saints. Okay, so I like to talk about sinners and saints because Martin Luther, the famous theologian from 1517, nailed his, what was it,
99 Theses?
95 thesis on the church house door. And I like to talk about sinners and saints because he said we're all sinners. We're born sinners, but because of Jesus's death and resurrection, we're absolved. Well, the sinner this week is going to be Meta, the company that runs Facebook, and Google, because they were sued by a young woman's parents on her behalf. They called her KGM because she was a minor at the time, so they don't use the minor child's name. It's taken some time for the case to come to trial and for the jury to make a decision. But the reason for the lawsuit was that Instagram and YouTube caused her to be addicted to those apps, and by watching Instagram reels and YouTube videos for 16 hours a day, it caused her to have mental health issues. And so some of these in the lawsuit that she claimed was anxiety, social phobia, depression, suicidal thoughts, body dysmorphia and body image issues, sleep disruption, and behavioral harms. So I wanted to talk to you about this because you were a teacher and a coach for 18 years. Uh, was this period of time when those apps were popular?
As you were describing that, what comes to mind is that the job for teachers has become increasingly difficult over the last 15 years. And I would say it started even before, the social media and things like that with video games and stuff. But it's so stimulating from a sensory standpoint in exactly the same way as scrolling does. It causes, dopamine hits or whatever to the chemicals in your brain. And that's the addictive part. It just makes you want to do it over and over again. That to sit through any type of, classical class or, normal high school setting is increasingly difficult for children and therefore increasingly difficult for the teachers to hold their attention because they just can't match something that is that stimulating.
So what she said is that they did this on purpose, that they engineered their apps to be addictive. And Meta and Google, they said, well, this child obviously had mental health problems before. Like there must have been some testimony that she had problems at home, and so they didn't cause this. In fact, that they were her coping mechanism.
Sure.
Well, the jury in Los Angeles didn't buy that, and they ruled that Meta and Google would have to pay something like $3 million total, which is really just a drop in the bucket for them. But,
Yeah.
there could be more lawsuits following, that model, people that just want money, saying that their kids didn't turn out the way that they should have because of those apps. Did you see any of these severe symptoms from your students and wonder, well, it's got to be their phone?
I never particularly thought that it had to be their phone. I definitely think over the course, because again, I started with high school, then I for about 2 years, then I went to college for the 9, and then I finished up in high school at the end. And from the time that I started to the time that I ended, what had increased so much were the kids who needed a lot more help, individual education plans and things like that. And so whether this was a contributing factor, I don't know, but certainly it can't help. I can tell you that, while they were in school, I'm in the back of the classroom one day and I'm going through the lesson with the kids and talking, and the kids have their Chromebooks open in front of them. And I'm looking at the screen and it's the digits are typing, but the kid doesn't even have his hands on the computer. And I'm like, what is going on right now? And he said, oh, we're sharing notes. So somebody else in the class is taking, this section of class, they're writing the notes. And I'm thinking like, I don't really think this is the most beneficial thing for you that someone else is,
Right.
doing this. You're really entrusting, somebody else at this point. And I think that that's probably, we are really entrusting the lives of our kids right now to these apps and the phones and things like that. I know for my wife and I, it is a big emphasis to really minimize their time on tablets and phones for exactly these reasons: the anxiety, the comparison stuff, and just what's really disturbing about it is you may have them on there to watch, a Christian video or something that you think is good, but you can't control the advertisements and the other things that are going to pop up during that time.
Right.
So, yeah.
So you being a public school teacher, private school teacher, did you do private school also?
I did both public and private for high school.
And so what have you chosen for your kids?
That's a great question. So we're definitely doing the homeschool route. I had a really good experience as a teacher and basketball coach at Round Rock Christian Academy, and when we were living there, certainly, I always felt that as my kids got old enough to go to school, they just ride to school with me, and they would attend at the same place where I was teaching. But as life would have it, we opened the Pilates business, and so we ended up moving. But we've definitely chosen the homeschool route. And a huge reason for that is um, just kind of our observances on how the school system is going and the influences. And so we want to play a primary role in the formative years for our children. And so my wife does a great job homeschooling them. There's so many resources out there to help parents nowadays. It's not nearly as hard as we thought. And I will say this, I really thought my wife would give this up after a year or two, um, but she loves it.
I was just
Um,
going to say
so,
that my wife and I didn't even give it a thought to
mhm,
homeschool. You really have to have the heart of a teacher, and she would admit she does not.
mhm,
When our children were about 18 months old, they just started tearing up the house.
yeah,
And so we needed them to go somewhere
Sure.
for a
yeah.
period of time, just so that, spills on the carpet and holes in the wall and all that type of stuff would be minimized.
Mhm.
But we really had a great experience with private school at Shepherd of the Hills, and the Supreme Court said that uh, you couldn't have prayer in schools because minds are so impressionable, in the younger ages. Well, that's exactly why I wanted them
Sure.
in a Lutheran school. So there's some law on this now. Over the years, I would have friends, that were going to Lutheran high school, that would want to go to certain universities, to expand their opportunities, really good schools. And they were facing barriers because they didn't have, the state test. They didn't graduate from public high school. There's
Mhm.
discrimination against homeschool
Yeah.
Hmm.
children,
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
so there's a law proposed that would make a graduation from homeschool the same about that.
No, actually, I haven't heard much about that. I know that actually one of the schools where I was a basketball coach was Bryan College in Dayton, Tennessee. And I think, if I remember the statistic correctly, about a third of all of their students, this was a smaller college, but about a third of all their students were homeschooled. And so, statistics actually show the homeschool kids do really well on the assessment tests and things like
Mm-hmm.
that.
Hmm.
And so I honestly haven't dug into what you were just referring to, but I just assumed because my wife is so good about researching that type of thing that they're able to, get kind of the necessary, paperwork that they need to go into college if that's the path that they're going to
Yeah,
go.
but
So,
colleges and universities should not be
well,
discriminating
for sure.
against homeschool
Yeah.
students.
No, absolutely.
Before we take a break and talk about your legacy, I wanted to hear a couple of lessons that you've learned in business.
Mhm.
What can you tell people out there? Definitely don't do this.
Um, that's a great question. Um,
Because you've been in other businesses,
sure.
you've had various experiences. Pilates is just your favorite right now, and in
Yeah.
fact, you've got one location near the Dominion. Opening up another one in
Mhm.
Bernie.
Yeah.
What lessons have you learned in that process?
Well, I'll give you a good one here. So we're opening up the second Pilates studio, but when COVID happened, um, nobody really knew how to react, right? The people were telling us this is going to be the rest of your life. You'll go through seasons where it's not spreading very much, then you go through seasons where it's going to be social distancing and masking. And so I kind of, I bought into it out of fear and things like that. We didn't know. At the time, we were shut down for 2 months. So we didn't know how this whole thing was going to play out. Um, and so I started thinking, I need something that is essential. And so I started looking at other franchises, and that's how I ended up picking, okay, well, what are some of the things that are not getting shut down right now? The home service companies, right? Everybody's remodeling their home and that sort of
Mm-hmm.
thing. So I started looking into some franchises there. And I ended up settling on one home service company that was relatively new, right? If you wanted a big piece of a market in a city, you were going to have to find something new, right? You're not going to find a Chick-fil-A and just be able to put it next to your house
We'll
right
have
now.
to take a break. When we come back, we'll get to the lesson, something that you should definitely not do. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Talk Law Radio. I'm Todd Marquardt here with Christian Mueller, who coached women's and men's basketball for 18 years, taught some high school, and now runs Club Pilates here in San Antonio and is opening up a location in Bernie soon. I just asked him, you've been in business, you've experienced a lot. What's one thing that you should definitely not do? And if you didn't hear his intro to that question, you'll have to click on the other YouTube video that has that segment. But here's his response.
Absolutely. So when I had opened up the Club Pilates, as I mentioned, and then I was looking for something else that was essential. So I started vetting different franchises. And, anytime you're doing a business, you're worried about money going out here and money going out there. So you're looking for ways to save. And the way that I chose to save was not involving a lawyer in reviewing the franchise documents. And, they give you that stuff. It's 200 pages. It's, it might as well be algebra written in a foreign language, right? Because it's stuff that the typical person doesn't understand. I couldn't even attempt to get through it all just because it doesn't make any sense to me. And so I tried to save money. I told myself, okay, if this was really a bad thing, then nobody else would be buying into the franchise. And so instead, to try to save a few $1,000s, what I ultimately did was I didn't have somebody else who was well-versed in this, another set of eyes on this, that probably would have said to me, have you looked at the information in here? Have you considered this? Because the truth is I hadn't until I was knee deep in the business, and it ended up being a failing business. And I look back and thought, boy, I really would have liked to involve decision.
Well, I just kept telling everybody that I had an essential business. And, it's debatable whether an attorney is essential or not. I mean, we're not a hospital,
Yeah.
but I said my clients need access to the judicial system. And I said, my listeners on the radio, they need access to information. And so I told all of my staff, at first I had to let everybody go, but then I'd bring them back one at a time. And so I said, if you get pulled over, tell them you work for an essential business, because the mayor shut down the city and said, you're not allowed to leave your house. Remember that?
Yeah. Yep.
Traffic was so much better back then.
Yeah.
Well, this is the fourth segment, so we're going to talk about legacy.
And now it's time for the Talk Law Radio Legacy Spotlight. What's your legacy? Sponsored by Marquardt Law Firm.
Marquardt Law Firm focuses on business and estate law, and that's last wills, living trusts, and tax-protected inheritance plans. It's all about legacy. So, I like to ask this question because Melody was on the show, as she probably told you. I put her on the spot as well. So legacy is anything that you've learned from those who have gone before you, or that you want to pass on to those that you love, or maybe it's something that you inherited, or maybe it's something that you want to stay in the family. Of all those things, what would you say is the most important to you regarding your legacy?
Well, for sure, it's what my children think of me. It was said, it never ended up on his tombstone, but Mickey Mantle made the comment that he wanted his tombstone to read, he was a great teammate. And, I've moved around a lot. And so, it doesn't give you as much of an opportunity to put down roots and develop tons of friendships as it would if you're staying. But to me, the most important thing is obviously my wife and my kids and what they think of me.
That's great. And so what do you want them to think about you? What do you want them to remember?
Yeah. From a values standpoint, I try to be extremely transparent with them about my mistakes and my transformation growing up. I talk to them a lot about, how I had a poverty mindset before I met my wife, a scarcity mentality and things like that, and how much I've changed in the process. And so whenever I recognize those things coming up with them, kids have a great sense of, that's not fair, right? Especially when you have
Right.
siblings, right? You want the same thing.
Yeah.
And the 6-year-old wants to do the same thing the 10-year-old gets to do.
Right.
And so, they have all sorts of excuses. that'll come up. And whenever I think that there's a moment where they're acting with like a poverty or a victim mentality,
Mm-hmm.
you know, we're quick to talk about it. And to, the number one thing that I say to them is 3 words: I am responsible. And so I would hope that what I'm teaching them is that a really proactive mindset and just this attitude: I am responsible. If my son is complaining about his playing time in baseball, I say 3 words, and he has to say, I am responsible. Because I realized that all that time when I was a victim, and I thought that the responsibleness, the reasons for whatever was happening right now was out there. I was giving away all my power at that time to make any type
Mm-hmm.
of change. And once I started changing those mindsets up here, things really started to improve for me.
Where did you learn this? I mean, this isn't taught in schools.
Yeah. Actually, the first person, that I learned it from was my wife. I was actually on an early date with her. And I can't remember, we were watching a video or something, and it was somebody on like America's Got Talent. And, she said, "That's remarkable." And my comment was, "Yeah, it works great for somebody that has nepotism going for them," or something like that. And she looked at me and said, "I don't believe in that at all. I think you can be anything that you put your mind to." And she turned around and walked away from me. And I was kind of like, wow. Okay, she's pretty direct with me right there.
Mm-hmm.
But as I watched her and the success that she was having, she's in a sales role, and I mean, obviously for them, she's like 95% commission, so it's all based on what you do.
Mm-hmm.
And to watch the confidence that she had, to watch the confidence that her leaders had, as I was getting to meet them, go on these incentive trips, and realize what great people they are. But it was really about their mindset. I just wanted what they had more and more. So I talked to them a lot, and then I started reading books. And her mentor, who's now the senior vice president of the company, he would talk about that all the time. Take 100% responsibility.
I love that. Yeah, and that's great to teach the kids. Now, part of your introduction to Pilates was a cousin,
Yes.
um, but you've grown to really have a mission there for the people that are working out.
Mhm.
Tell us about that and how that fits into your legacy.
Absolutely. Um, for me, obviously, the most defining moment in my life was losing my mom at 15. Most kids don't go through that at that time. They go through it a lot later. And as painful as it was, the further you get from the experience, the more the pain dissipates, right? You cope, you learn to grow. You don't think about that person every day. But then all of a sudden you have kids again, and now you're reading a book. They're sitting on your lap before bed. You're reading 10 Little Fingers, 10 Little Toes, or some children's book, and they mention Nana or Grandma and Grandpa. And then all of a sudden it hits you again.
Mm-hmm.
You're never going to get to meet Grandma and Grandpa, or because they passed away. And it kind of tears the wound open. And so I realize as I walk through my Pilates studio all the time, and I see people who are, I think our oldest member right now is 86, and she's done 800 classes. And one of my other members there, she's 73. She has now done classes 3 days a week religiously for the last 5 years. And she talked about how she can get on the floor and play with her 1-year-old grandson. All right. And that's my mission, is I want to help people age as gracefully as possible so they can make as many memories with their children and grandchildren as possible.
Yeah, that's really powerful. Thank you for sharing that. Um, gosh, yeah, I understand. Um, but the older generation isn't your only demographic that you serve. Tell us how who usually shows up, who gets a lot out of this. So who would you like to come try out
Sure.
Pilates for the first time?
Yeah. Yeah. We have members as young as 16 years old. Their parents sign them up sometime. And so they start at 16, they go till about 87 right now. And so we have a good number that are, 20 to 30, another good number 30 to 40, but our biggest bulk is definitely the 40 to 60 category. And so I think probably the number one thing about Pilates is it's low impact. I worked out a lot differently when I was in my 20s, and I was working at a college and things like that back then than I could now. I don't think everybody can continue doing CrossFit,
Right.
their entire life. At some
No
point,
joke.
the impact starts to add up. It hurts your knees, hurts your back, shoulders, rotator cuffs, etc. And so Pilates is just such a safe exercise, and it's low impact that, we say Pilates is for everybody. And you can literally do it from, I have my son do it because he works on rotational strength since he's a hitter in baseball. But you can literally do it from about 10 years old on up through, the end of your life.
And is there anything that you can offer, a one-time class, a discount?
Sure.
How can we get these people to try it?
Absolutely. Well, we always have a free intro class for anybody who's interested. I'll be able to give you a link if you want to post it later, and they can just put in their information, and we'll give them a call, get them signed up for one of those. And then periodically during different times of the year, we offer 10% off your first month of membership and a zero enrollment fee. So if your listeners want to take advantage of that, then we're happy to offer.
Okay. Tell us where these locations are.
So the first location that I opened is basically right across from the Dominion neighborhood. So it's right there on the I-10 access road. And then we will be opening our second location in Bernie, also on the I-10 access road, pretty close to where Highway 46 meets I-10. And that's going to be opening on May 14th.
Awesome. Look forward to it. Is there anything else you want people to know about Club Pilates, your life, homeschooling, coaching men and women?
Well, this is one of the things that I talk to my staff about is most of the people that are going to give us a call, they've just gone through a season where they haven't been working out, and that season could be many years, right? And so there's going to be some trepidation about getting back into it. We're going to be there to come alongside them during that. And one of the things that we try to encourage folks is, a lot of times they'll have the objection, well, it's not going to work with my schedule, or it's not going to, it's not going to work for this reason or that reason. And, I tell them, if you fight for your limitations, you get to keep them. But if you look for possibilities, you're going to find them. And so that's our goal, is to get as many people as possible doing Pilates, experiencing the benefit of movement so that they can age as gracefully as possible.
Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Todd.
We'll talk to you later.
Most families don't realize they have hidden legal blind spots until it's too late. Wills, trust, Medicaid planning, even protecting a business. These are the kinds of issues attorney Todd Marquardt helps uncover before they become problems. Todd is the host of Talk Law Radio, where each week he guides listeners through the legal challenges families, veterans, and business owners face, while showing them the practical steps to protect what matters most. Catch Talk Law Radio, Saturdays at 11 a.m. on 9:30 a.m. The Answer, 6:30 a.m. The Word, and now in Houston on AM 1070 and 103.3 FM The Answer, or anytime on YouTube. Planning isn't just about documents. It's about peace of mind, security for loved ones, and building a legacy that lasts. Don't wait for a crisis. Do it before you die.